podcast της Athens Voice.
Welcome to Reporting Europe.
My name is Mίρκα Καρρά.
And my name is Marlen Lampl.
Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the European Union and its migration management. Let's start right away. Throughout history, people have migrated from one place to another. They move for various reasons and through different ways. Europe has the highest number of migrants compared to other continents. Some migrants look for legal pathways. Others risk their lives because of political oppression, war, or poverty, but also to find family reunification, work, knowledge, and education.
Every person that's migrating has its own story. This phenomenon impacts society in many different ways, with a variety of responses from people all over Europe. The European Union has been trying to regulate these migration flows and the challenges coming with it for many years now. Treaties were signed, borders were abolished, and the European Union slowly gained more power in managing and legislating immigration.
With the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian army in February this year, a new migration wave hit Europe. After only a few days of war, over 1 million people had already arrived in Ukraine's neighboring countries, mainly in Poland, but also in Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, and other European countries. As a response to the mass exodus of Ukrainian refugees, the European Union reactivated the so-called Temporary Protection Directive, short TPD, which was first introduced in 2001 after the mass influx of refugees following the war in former Yugoslavia.
It provides temporary protection without having to assess every single person and putting them through asylum procedure. It can last up to 3 years and guarantees several rights for the refugees, like a residence permit, access to the asylum procedure, employment, accommodation, medical care and education, and many more. At an EU Council meeting in Brussels in March 2022, the European Interior Ministers reached a historic agreement.
Agreeing on fast and simplified reception of Ukrainian refugees in all EU states.
For the record, the Council has to vote with a qualified majority for the TPD to be activated, meaning that 15 out of 27 member states need to vote, or member states who altogether represent 65% of the total EU population. The TPD has been proposed in the 2015 refugee crisis as well, but it didn't go forward due to the difficulty in securing a qualified majority vote in the Council. In other words, translated into political unwillingness. However, one might wonder why the European Council was so supportive and decided unanimously on this matter this time.
That also raises the question whether the EU has double standards when it comes to dealing with refugees from different parts of the world.
We asked politicians from the European Parliament about their opinion and talked to Fabian Keller from Renew Europe, Birgit Zippel from the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, Lena Dupont from the European People's Party, and Nina Gregori from the European Asylum Support Office, and they told us this.
Geneva Convention is saying that anyone fleeing a war has to be rescued and his rights has to be explained and he has to be protected, have access if he wishes to a refugee procedure, and in any case have a statute that allows him to be in security. So I believe the shock for European citizens was very big because this happens at EU borders. We have also learned from the past. We know about this risk of double standard, and so we are very careful in applying correctly the Geneva Convention and its human rights.
What we have to keep in mind, nevertheless, is that different to the normal asylum procedure, the Temporary Protection Directive is there only first for 1 year. It can be extended for another 2 years, but it's clearly limited in time. So at the end, if the situation in Ukraine will not improve, people still have to decide whether they will apply for asylum or try to find other ways to stay. And also the number of people arriving in Europe already now is much bigger than in the years 2015-16. So there is another need to fasten processes.
The TPD had the unique selling point that it was an instrument at hand that we could use immediately, so with immediate effect. With the war in Ukraine, it's the first time that we do have the war and the conflict in our direct neighborhood, so at our European borders directly, which of course leads to another, I wouldn't even say to another responsibility, but of course to more direct effect of the war also on the European Union.
Ukraine is also our neighborhood, basically, European neighborhood. And of course, this unprecedented flow that happened, so we talk about 5 million people that basically have come to European Union. Of course, this in a way would not be sustainable. We will not be able to do that, even supporting member states. They will not be able to do that through, let's say, regular asylum procedure.
As we can see, the European Union has made everything possible to help Ukrainian refugees. Not only the EU's response to refugee inflows has changed, also various member states showed immediate solidarity. For countries like Poland, we have seen a huge shift. For the record, now in Poland, every second person is Ukrainian and the country has taken 3.5 million refugees so far. At this point, the question arises, why is there such a change? We talked to Adriana Molenda, president of Jeden Świat, the Polish branch of NGO Service Civil International, and she told us.
Most of the people started helping in one way or another, supporting Ukrainian refugees or other refugees from Ukraine in transporting them from the border, people hosting them in their homes or in the apartments they have that have been empty. Flats, like people that you would previously never expect to have much interest in the refugee topic. If we compare the situation now to the situation in 2015, we can clearly see the difference. I remember those times pretty well because at the moment when it started, we had election campaign. And the party which is nowadays ruling Poland started to use refugees as a scarecrow, let's say, something to demonize and scare people with. So basically, probably the fact that they won those elections was also because of that fact that they said that they are going to protect Polish society from this threat. And people were scared because they didn't know any Syrian people, usually. And now the situation is different because we have already had huge Ukrainian diaspora in Poland. After 2014, after the war in Ukraine really started, unless it was a different kind of war, people from Ukraine started coming to Poland, moving to Poland, working here. So we had many Ukrainian friends. It would be, I think, difficult for the government to oppose this kind of spontaneous solidarity movement that appeared in the society. I mean, there is some part of the society which would support a different agenda, not so supportive to the refugees, of course. But government, for some reason, chose not to do it, so they let the society help, and now they are also joining this effort, let's say, to some extent.
In that context, it is also interesting to investigate what role the media plays in portraying the two crises.
I think it plays some role because we have governmental media, which obviously has a different kind of agenda. They don't picture Muslim refugees in a positive way.
As we know, media plays a vital part in shaping people's opinions and perceptions of certain topics. Especially in this current crisis, it is important to obtain a balanced, non-biased way of reporting. Naya Kalfeli, a media research scientist, gave us her expert opinion on how the media has covered the two crises.
Well, in regard with the current Ukrainian refugee crisis, we can say that there is obviously a shift in the frame. There is a more humanitarian approach towards Ukrainian refugees fleeing from war. And This is, of course, this has a positive aspect and is welcome, as more than 4 million people have left Ukraine in less than 40 days. But at the same time, what is worrying about the coverage of this crisis is that we have seen many Western media, including Greek ones and also international ones, in an effort to pour sympathy on Ukrainian refugees. We have seen them describe them as white, Christians, middle class, educated, civilized, and make comparisons to other groups of people from Africa or the Middle East. And we could definitely say that this is racism. This is a humanitarian approach towards Ukrainian refugees, but at the same time, it's racist towards other groups of people who are also in need of protection.
Media framing clearly shows bias in reporting about the war and the Ukrainian refugees, attributing it more importance compared to the reporting about conflicts in other regions. The role of media in shaping society's perceptions of war is very crucial and needs to be unbiased, balanced, and fair. We heard that improvement is necessary. How can this be achieved?
So I think we have to work on two different directions towards the improvement of media coverage. And the first direction, I think, would be education and training of journalists in a way that helps them better understand diversity-related issues. This means that, for example, journalists need to broaden their practices in order to include voices of refugees and migrants, to include the voice of NGOs and international organizations so that they provide a multi-party approach, to discuss solutions based on human rights, discuss the context of events, to move, in other words, towards models of journalism such as peace journalism or constructive journalism that provide a more rich and comprehensive understanding of these issues. So this is one direction. But in order to do all these things, this is the second direction that I'm thinking that we have to work towards, is that journalism needs resources. And we need to address all the structural constraints that journalism faces at the moment. And this means that we need more human resources, more journalists working on the field, more money to be invested on investigative journalism, and more time.
Of course, also on the EU level, change in policy and legislation is inevitable. In 2020, the European Commission presented the Pact for Migration and Asylum. It sets out improved and faster procedures throughout the asylum and migration system, and it balances the principles of fair sharing of responsibility and solidarity amongst the member states. Because in practice, the coordination between Brussels and the EU member states is not easy. The aim was to come to terms with the EU's management of migration and asylum, which was described by many as a failure, and to bridge the gap between the EU member states. It was also a matter of calling those states into political responsibility that categorically refused to redistribute refugees, even despite political pressure and rulings by the European Court of Justice. Various goals are being pursued with that pact, for example, a reform of the Dublin system, an acceleration of asylum procedures, the commitment of all EU states to a European solidarity, which, however, and this is the result of the political learning process within the EU, can be exercised in different ways.
That is, all EU states should really be held accountable, regardless of their affectness, as in the case of Italy and Greece, and regardless of their general political or ideological reservations about refugees from certain regions and foreign cultures, as in the case of Poland and Hungary, for example.
The EU Commission's proposal no longer leaves it up to the member states to decide whether to exercise solidarity, but only how to do so.
In one case, this may mean that states are willing to accept refugees according to certain key, and in another case, states will commit to helping organize the repatriation of unrecognized refugees. The question still remains: how can this be achieved?
I am working on it since I am MEP, and I defend several principles on this reform. The first one is a new solidarity mechanism to make sure there is really a sharing of responsibility between the member states. Stronger focus also on the implementation of the EU rules at the national level. I think family reunification, which is in existing Dublin rule, is not well applied. We apply much more the criteria of the first entry, the country of first entry, to define the country responsible for a refugee. But that should not be the case.
You know, one of the main challenges between all the member states when talking about a new asylum system is the question of relocation. So should all member states take on board refugees and do the asylum procedure? And still, that's true. There are some member states who say we don't need relocation, we don't want to have it. On the other hand, what we see right now under the Temporary Protection Directive is that the refugees individually do relocate themselves. So they are not staying in Poland, Romania, any other country near the border, but they continue migrating and they arrive in Germany, in France, Belgium, Portugal. So they are organizing their relocation themselves. So I hope that could be a chance also for the asylum system to say this kind of relocation makes it easier both for the refugees, but also for the society.
The things to come, if we see what Putin is working on and threatening the world with famine and so on and so forth, we already know that there will be new movements of people coming from different directions because of a danger of starvation and things and so on. So we urgently need to speed up also our work on the Common Asylum and Migration Pact, of course also meaning that we need to find solutions for the solidarity mechanism. And a last sentence to that, I think that there were some changes also within the council, personal level, but also political level, that probably will make some room for a more open and a bit more flexible discussion when you look at the, let's say, the groups of states which had very vocal position in the past.
I think that what we wish as an end result is that we would have in Europe fast and efficient asylum procedures, meaning that, of course, there will be, in a way, clear rules. There will be also tools that we can have or could be implemented in the system, such as the European list of safe countries of origin, European list of safe third countries, where with that, you could then, in combination of also with potential fast and efficient return, and in combination with good partnership with third countries, so the countries of arrivals, that you could have then at the end of the day really functioning system with all the elements that needs to be in a way, of course, improved or still that need to be advanced in this respect.
It seems that we might not have yet reached the pinnacle of refugee flows in the European Union. Given the impact of geopolitical, socio-economic, religious and environmental factors, the movement of people will become frequent in the future. Food shortage, war, the climate and economic crisis are amongst the reasons why people will move from one place to another in the long run. The European Union will evaluate the current pact of migration and asylum again on 2024. It's now more important than ever to have a future-proof, human-centric, strong European migration strategy.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Reporting Europe. This podcast was made by Mírka Καρρά and Marlen Lampl, postgraduate students of Digital Media, Communication and Journalism at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. We would be happy if you leave us a review. Thank you for listening.
Ήταν ένα podcast από την Athens Voice. Μπορείτε να ακούσετε τα podcast της Athens Voice στο athensvoice.gr και στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcast και το Google Play Music.